So I thought we'd have a tea and a chat this morning now that my adorable little cat Mickey has had his morning exercise and his morning num-nums and he is tired out and hopefully won't bother me doing this. I love my baby. I wanted to address one of the most common questions that comes up about nomad lifestyle, and that's how do you get the internet? So, how do I stay connected on the road? For me, the name of the game is redundancy. Yes, I own 2 cell phones, a hotspot device, and a spot satellite communication device. And for me, this makes sure that I'm not only safe, but I can do whatever work I need to do on the road. Every nomad is going to have different answers on this. It depends on your priorities, how much money you're willing to spend, and how much you're willing to do workarounds to get your end game. Some people really try to take advantage of public Wi-Fi. Some people are hardly never on public Wi-Fi. There's this assumption that if you're in van life, you are spending a lot of times in coffee shops in order to have internet. I would say in the last probably like 1.5 years of being out and about and living out of vehicles, both in city streets and in boondocking situations, that I have mostly not actually used a lot of public Wi-Fi. I think I've kind of locked down on a way that kind of works for me to have internet for my devices. Now, I did ask a question in a community tab about what network people prefer as a dependable source while traveling, and I basically said AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and other. It didn't surprise me that a lot of people really like Verizon. I still hear that about cross-nomad communities, that Verizon is better, the best, you're less likely to get drop signals, etc., etc. And I don't know that I entirely disagree with them, but I think the best way to have signal, and I think I did have other as an option. Editing Dawn, check on that for me. Wait, my cat is destroying something. But Verizon is the big choice. And so you might be asking, well, what do you have as a cellular provider? And also, why are you talking about cellular providers when we're talking about internet? Because basically on the road, you're probably going to be hotspotting from a cell phone or a hotspot device, both of which use cellular network towers, and through those cellular network towers, that's how you are accessing the internet, not public Wi-Fi. And almost, it used to be a paid service, but a lot of phone companies default are allowing hotspotting from phones, and that's how most people get the internet, and that's how I have been getting the internet for the past couple of years. So at the beginning of the video, I actually have 3 cellular devices plus a satellite device, and you may be asking why? Why is that even necessary? Just pick the best one, like asked in the poll, and stick with that. And like I said, I wouldn't disagree with Verizon being one of the strongest choices for the most consistent signal. But so why? Why the multiple devices? Why is it needed? Why isn't Verizon enough? Just go with Verizon and it be enough. Well, I believe in this thing called redundancy, and redundancy is the only thing that has worked for me to have internet in more situations than not. Now, mind you, I've only traveled areas in the US. I've spent most of my nomad life in California. I spent a significant amount of time in Oregon. I have traveled across the country and came back, but it was pretty much in a straight line, so I did not hit a lot of states up and down in the direction that I wanted to go in. I did go to Colorado recently from Southern California, and then I headed northward after that towards Oregon, which is where I am now. So I've had a lot of traveling signal, and what I've learned is none of these can be depended upon in every situation. So the easiest way for me to make sure I always have internet is to cover all 3 towers. And so that requires a thing called redundancy. Now, you may have heard this word before, but it has a particular meaning in engineering. Redundancy means the inclusion of extra components which are not strictly necessary to functioning in case of the failure of other components. And so how does that apply to traveling and having all of these different devices, which some people may see as a bit extreme? Now, no matter what you do, you can get the bestest network ever, and there's still going to be times where you don't get signal. There are gorgeous places that are just nowhere near a cell tower that your rinky-dink little cell phone could connect to. Now, maybe if you had some massive like system you could send up into the air, I'm not really sure, you might be able to get signal. Now, there are things called cell boosters, and everybody I've talked to with the cell boosters says it helps sometimes. They're super expensive for it helps sometimes. Now, sometimes it's not the booster's fault. Like me, I bought my cell booster when I was in my minivan, so I bought something very small for cars with a dinky little antenna. I was not going to buy another one when the reviews I was getting, even on people who got bigger systems, was it helps sometimes. Now, luckily, my roof is really tall. Like, my box is an 8x12 box. I think my ceiling is almost 8 foot high from here to there, and it's on top of my wheels. I'm almost 11 feet in the air from the ground, and on top of that, I have my dinky little antenna, and it helps sometimes. Will it recover me if I'm in a dead zone for a certain provider? No, but it helps sometimes. And that's basically also the idea of redundancy. It helps sometimes. So basically, I have 2 cell phones on 2 different providers, a hotspot, and the satellite messenger. Now, the point of my satellite messenger is to be able to communicate and get help if I'm in an emergency situation where there is no cell signal. Because like I said, no matter what you do, you're going to be in an emergency situation with no cell signal. But it doesn't really solve my needs for the internet. What it's basically supplementing is when none of these guys have a signal. And even though each of these covers the 3 major networks, there's times none of these guys have signal. So I have the satellite messenger device, which I did a whole video on, and maybe I'll remember to put a card up. Editing Dawn, put a card up about this device. I also put a link to it in the description, but watch my other video because there are other options besides this. This is just the one I chose as a satellite messenger system. Now, there are dreams in the Nomad community of satellite internet becoming really accessible and solving a lot of the access problems for people who like to boondock. Now, I will say, not every Nomad, not every vehicle dweller likes to boondock. They don't even want to. They're very happy staying closer to the cities, closer to metro areas, closer to those environments, and not because they can't leave, not because there's barriers to them leaving, but they just don't like the idea of being that far away and that disconnected from quote-unquote civilization. There are also RVers who go from RV park to RV park. They never go out in the woods and try to live off solar and try to live off the grid. They go to a place with a grid that they can plug into that's still, you know, very naturey, and more than likely there's going to be some kind of signal. It may not be the best, and boosters are definitely going to help those guys because they aren't so far out in the middle of nowhere, undeveloped land that it's an issue. They're going to an RV park that's probably going to have somewhere to plug in, that might have water. It'll give them a semi-experience of kind of being away, but they're not really cutting themselves off and going out in the middle of nowhere. Like, that exists as well. So you have people who aren't trying to be really, really far away. But if you are changing locations in any way, your cell signal quality is going to change based on that, no matter who you have. Now, it might be, you know, you can't watch Netflix one night, but you can still make phone calls, you can still send text messages in an emergency, but you just don't have a strong enough signal to watch Netflix, scroll the internet, be on Instagram, all of that, but your safety is covered at the very least. Now, one thing I like about having the 2 cell phones, and I'll circle back to internet and more about redundancy, is that I have been in situations where a cell phone died, a cell phone broke. So even when both of these are both connected to their networks, it's still nice. Like, I've had times where I've changed phones and I needed a second phone in order to set up my new phone because there were problems or something wasn't connecting or it was just required. And so I find it useful to have a second phone for situations where you need to use a phone besides your primary phone, especially since I travel alone. So if I needed that anyway for security, and I used to have my second phone on a dumb phone, I had it on a track phone that was just a flip phone, and it was just an emergency secondary phone. But I decided to change them both to smartphones. And the reason is, both of these have the ability to hotspot, but both of those hotspots are limited. So even if I never lose signal for a whole month on either of these phones, if one's hotspot is out, slow, not working, I can try the other hotspot, and that's before I even use my hotspot device. So when I talk about redundancy, it's for like a lost signal or only one tower of the 3 main towers working, but it's also for I have a certain amount of hotspot on here and it seems to be lagging or not working. The phone's working fine, but the hotspot's just not doing what I need it to. Well, let me try this hotspot. And so that gives me 2 options to hotspot from that are on 2 completely different providers. So maybe even I'm getting deprioritized on one phone. I have a second phone as an option that might prioritize me a little bit better. I've had 2 smartphones for a while now. I upgraded my second number to just a regular smartphone to get all those smartphone bonuses. I can stream from either phone as long as I'm getting signal. So again, if one is being slow, I'm getting signal on both, and one is slow and the other one's not as slow, well, okay, I'll watch Netflix on this one tonight. That's not struggling so much. So the redundancy of having the 2 cell phones really does give me a lot of options. Now, at one point I did, to cover the third network, think about getting another cell phone, but I was like, you know what? What if I had a device that prioritizes no calls, nothing besides giving me internet? And that's when I decided to go ahead and get the hotspot device. And this is the device I'm willing to drop if I need to cut the budget. If I need to cut the budget, cut some money out of the budget, I'm willing to drop this device and just not have it. It's on a completely separate network from these 2. There are times, because both of these can text over a Wi-Fi connection, I can turn this on, use the signal on here to get one of these phones to be able to text or maybe even call. And so in a way, this is supporting my cell phones without me needing a third cell phone. Because while I can justify 2, I don't know why I would need a third except to get that third tower. And so initially I bought a very, very cheap cell phone to cover that third network. And it just didn't work out. It was kind of annoying. I was like, I really do not need a third phone. And so having this has helped. And again, if for some reason I use all of my hotspot on this for my laptop and I use all of my hotspot on this for my laptop and it hasn't happened, I always have this as well to use for my laptop. And that gives me, honestly, enough internet that I personally have not run out. When I watch TV shows or movies or casual stuff like that, I try to do that directly on the cell phone because the cell phone, watching on the cell phone is unlimited, whereas hotspot has a certain amount of megabytes per month that I can use. And so if I'm watching Netflix, I'm going to watch it on the phone. I'm not going to try to watch it on my laptop, even for the larger screen. But if I need to work on the laptop, I want to have the most amount of internet I can get out of these 3 devices. And I have yet, since I had this 3 device setup, even when I had this 2 device setup, it was never me running out of hotspot usage. I was trying to find the right word here. People think I'm so tech savvy, and I'm not. But it was never about me running out of the ability of the hotspot from my phone. I did cut it close a couple of times, but I never ran out. So really, this is just bonus. Now, it isn't always fast because, again, all 3 of these guys are depending on cell tower access. So it's not as fast as broadband in a house. And sometimes that means I just need to be patient and I need to plan efficiently. Honestly, some of the slowness in uploading to YouTube is just waiting. And 2 things are very, very slow: exporting the video after I edit it and uploading that video to YouTube. I have had 15-minute videos take 4 hours to upload. That's after I've spent 6 hours editing them and waited for 3 hours for it to export from the editor. So a lot of hours can get consumed in just waiting, and some of that waiting is the limitation of living entirely off of devices that sometimes aren't that fast. But I have not had to depend much on public Wi-Fi in the last couple of years, and I really think that's because I try to have as much redundancy as possible. Having all three is more important to me when I'm traveling a lot, because I have no idea what my signal life is going to be when I get to where I'm going. When I'm more static and I have an idea of if one phone is dependable, if both phones are doing fine, if all three signals are fine. Again, it's not a big deal to just drop this and not have it at all. This is an extra thing that I don't need. Now, at this point, I am using both of these numbers for different reasons and different people. So I do like that I have the two phones, and I'd be reluctant to give up either of these numbers. But if I had to flip one of them to a cheaper plan or something, that's what I would do. I also pay for this. This I pay for yearly. I forget how much it is. Editing Dawn 3, please throw it up on the screen. So I pay for this as well. I consider this a priority safety device if I am traveling, but if it really became an issue to have to pay for it, it is something I would be willing to put on pause in order to be able to pay for other things, because this is what I call one of my bonus safety devices. Now, there are options for trying to figure out what's going to be your most efficient cell signal while you are traveling. But those options are iffy at best to me. A lot of times I have been able to go to iOverlander or freecampsites.net, two of the places I search for sites if I'm thinking about going boondocking, and get some idea of cell signal sometimes. Sometimes it just looks like a cool place to go, but I don't actually know what my cell signal will be like when I get there. If I am going out, if I know it's going to be far out, way off the grid, I plan for the possibility of no signal. So what do I need to do to prepare myself while I'm in a city area where all of my signal is great or one of my signals are great, so that if I do, have to go 2 weeks to enjoy this place that's really far off the grid with no signal, am I losing connection to anything I need besides my emergency device? I plan to only have the spot as a communication device if I go far out and none of my cell phones. And if one or two of them in the hotspot works, that's great. If just the hotspot works, that's great. If, the hotspot in one of the cell phones works, that's great, and that's perfectly okay with me. Now, I know everyone has that fantasy of being out on the mountaintop with your laptop open, working your digital job that doesn't require you to go to work, or maybe you've saved enough money to not have to worry about working, but you still want to be on your laptop doing your laptop things that you do in your house. Well, this is a fun fantasy, but you're probably going to have a mixed experience no matter what you do. I mean, that's just facts. I know somebody is out there, I watch this YouTuber and they say they get great internet. Sure. Just in conversations with people, I know for a fact it's a mixed experience. The difficulty of adjusting to not having that super fast internet you can get in the house, especially if you're used to having it, can be an adjustment for some people. A lot of people, their first big thing they do is they go to a Vanlife event, most of which are in areas that either have sketchy signal, light signal, or no signal, and so they spend a lot of time shocked at how quickly they lose access to all those signals and things. So just know it's a nice fantasy, but it might take some finagling to make it work if you are working on the road in a way that requires a computer. And even with extra tools like boosters, you may have to work around a signal and still struggle a bit. All the boosters basically is an antenna in the air that's trying to basically bridge you to a cell phone tower and bring that signal into your vehicle. That's all it's doing. So it'll depend on how high you can get your antenna, how directional the antenna is, and your ability to point it in the right direction. And it may help a little bit. So, I am not rich. Don't know if you know that, but I'm definitely not. I've been a poor girl trying to make it on these YouTubes for a few years now, and I'm not doing too bad, but I am definitely not rich, and I do pick up contractual work. I say that to say I could definitely not afford to cover all the towers and have my spot device without using MVNOs. Now, what is an MVNO? An MVNO is a mobile virtual network operator. So what the heck do I mean by a mobile virtual network operator? Well, I'm basically talking about Boost. I'm talking about Straight Talk. I'm talking about Walmart Family Mobile. I'm talking about almost any provider that is not T-Mobile, Verizon, or AT&T directly. Because all of these MVNOs, which is almost everybody else who's not T-Mobile, Verizon, or AT&T, almost all of them are still using towers from T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T. At the end of the day, it's still coming back to their towers and the accessibility of their towers when you're thinking about travel. But when you're thinking about cost, by using the MVNOs, you're usually going to come in at a discount. They tend to cost less than going to the primary provider, but you're still getting access to the same towers. Well, what in the heck is T-Mobile getting out of another company advertising, their phone as better options than whatever else is out there? There has to be some catch to it, right? Sometimes there is. Sometimes there's so little it doesn't matter, and it really depends on your priorities. But the big one is if you have, say, Visible instead of Verizon, the Verizon customers may get prioritized over you. If there's like a network clog or something else going on, they will prioritize their customers first. During a busy hour, a Verizon phone bought directly from Verizon may not experience as much lag as, say, a Visible phone. And I'm just using that as an example, even though Visible is an interesting case, but we'll get there. Or let's say you have Straight Talk and a T-Mobile phone. Well, if T-Mobile needs to prioritize somebody, they're going to prioritize the person who bought T-Mobile from T-Mobile off of the person who's using T-Mobile towers on Straight Talk. And so that's basically, where you might feel a difference. Now, if you get into the details, you need to compare plans, advantages and disadvantages, and that is such a personal thing of if you're feeling like you're going to get the same thing from the secondary provider as you get from the first person provider. That's something you have to sort of examine and evaluate on your own. Now, Sprint used to exist, but Sprint has pretty much merged with T-Mobile, and while there are still a few independent Sprint towers, I think they're almost completely absorbed into T-Mobile in any way that's significant. They used to be a bigger player in the game. Their towers used to be a bigger player in the game, but that's basically, they've been bought by T-Mobile. They're merging with T-Mobile. They're basically out of the game. They were man number 4, and that man is down. Now, personally for me with MVNOs, I have not experienced any significant lag, even when I didn't have the 2 smartphones. When I had the smartphone and the dumb phone, because I've had the backup phone for a while as a safety measure, again, for situations where I might need a secondary phone, or maybe don't want to give somebody my main phone number, to be quite honest. I've had that sort of secondary phone for a while, but it was on the dumb phone. And even then, when I only had one smartphone that I could stream from, that I could hotspot from, I personally did not experience any significant losses that mattered to me using the MVNO instead of the primary provider. And that was T-Mobile. But I was also mostly in the city. I was working. So I was in an area where pretty much any provider would work. And that's the thing about, like, most cities. It isn't universally true, but in most cities that have businesses, that have people coming, going from stores, that have people going to work, in most places, the tower experience across providers is going to be pretty good. I've had T-Mobile on and off for years. A lot of times, even through MVNOs, they are the most affordable provider. And so I've had T-Mobile on and off. And as long as I lived in a major city, and as long as I was mostly in a major city, I didn't really experience a whole lot of issues with T-Mobile. I will say, going rural, I have experienced more loss of signal with my T-Mobile MVNO than I have the other two MVNOs. Now, some MVNOs, and this is why I said I'd get back to Visible, are fake MVNOs. And what do I mean by that? Yeah, I mean that they're actually owned by the company as their discount bargain bin version. And that gets back to the Visible Verizon thing. Visible is actually owned by Verizon. It's not like some separate company that started and then is using Verizon's towers, which is why I think most people have had a extremely positive experience with them, because it actually is Verizon. Now, the problem of you can get deprioritized over Verizon customers still exists, but just know it's not a real MVNO. It's an MVNO in that, in a way, it is represented as a separate company because you're not going to Verizon. You can't go on the Verizon website and log into your account. But as a company, they are under the umbrella of Verizon. So it's not like Mint Mobile, which is kind of over here just like leasing T-Mobile's towers. It's basically Verizon offering a discount version of their service under a different name. Cricket is another case of kinda. Cricket did start as a separate company, but I think it was like 2014. They became a part of AT&T. So Cricket is owned by AT&T in this point. In fact, in 2017, I think it was, they actually combined, as far as like a company, as an actual company, the branding didn't change. As far as like Cricket's customers never even noticed. It was all the same to them. But in 2017, Cricket actually merged with AT&T Prepaid. So they actually exist under the same company umbrella within AT&T, but is actually owned by AT&T. So again, you don't have Cricket over here doing its own thing, leasing access to AT&T's towers. AT&T owns Cricket, and so it became their discount prepaid service. So if you get Cricket, you get your AT&T. T-Mobile's like official bargain bin version used to be called Metro PCS. Metro PCS did used to be separate, but it was actually acquired by T-Mobile in, when was it? 2012. In 2012. And then in 2018, it launched as Metro by T-Mobile. So sort of the veil melted away. It had to do with them kind of combining the companies, and that was the amount of time it needed to sort of flip the branding the way they wanted it to. But at this point, Metro by T-Mobile, and even a few years back when they originally bought Metro PCS, I can't even say it, when they bought Metro, it's already belonged to T-Mobile since, 2012. So again, T-Mobile has an official bargain basement version. I hate saying bargain basement, but it's like the discount. You're on the network, but you're being a little bit of a rebel and going to the side gig sort of version of T-Mobile, but you're still basically getting T-Mobile. Now, the interesting thing about T-Mobile is most of the MVNOs are actually accessing T-Mobile towers. Now, some of them do it in combination with other providers' towers, but T-Mobile basically has their hand in the bag of almost all the MVNOs. T-Mobile will also be on networks that offer multiple networks, such as Google Fi. AT&T and Verizon are a little tougher to find on MVNOs. So your best bet is probably to use Visible and Cricket to get a cheaper experience probably than you're going to get directly on AT&T or Verizon. What I also like, so the incentive a lot of times on the main providers is also the phones they offer. Now, this isn't always true, but a lot of times better phones at cheaper prices for better deals are offered by the main company. So if you really want the newest, latest, greatest phone, the fastest, most awesomest phone, the best hardware, the best cameras, the best all that, you're going to get a better deal on a phone on one of the major providers, because they're counting on the fact that sometimes people say they don't have contracts, but the contract is the phone. And so that's the way they're getting around that. And some people are really direct about their contracts. If you cancel early, basically what they're covering is the loaner they gave you on that phone. And that's usually where the big charges come in. Also, at some point, since you have to have the latest, greatest, and bestest phone, it's going to stop being the latest and greatest, bestest phone, and you haven't paid it off yet. But you can get this new phone. You can trade in your old phone, even though it's not paid off, and you can get this new phone. You just, you need to stick with us a little bit longer. Because now you either are in another 2-year contract or something like that, or they're gonna break down your payments to take about 2 years, one of the other two. And so they use the latest, greatest, and bestest on the cutting edge technology a lot of times to entice you over to the main providers as opposed to the sub providers, which may offer discount for versions of the newest phones, or maybe not as many deals to get that newer phone in your hand. If you're willing to pay for it straight out, then you can get your hands on it. You can use it on their network, but they may not offer the same deals to get the latest and greatest and bestest phones on these MVNO networks, including the ones that are owned by the companies such as Metro, Visible, and Cricket. Because they still want the majority of their money to be coming through that primary provider. So any incentives they can give you to get over there and stay over there are things they want to do. But if you're like me, you don't mind buying a phone 2 or 3 generations old at a discount, full price. My favorite is manufacturer refurbished. Sometimes I don't read well, and I've gotten some refurbished phones that weren't manufacturer refurbished. But if you are going to do a refurb, I do recommend manufacturer refurbished over somebody's old phone, which I've done that too, or just something that's labeled refurbished. Amazon also has certain phones that have guarantees and certain phones that don't. So if you go the Amazon route, definitely double check. But manufacturer refurbished is my favorite way to buy a phone. And I like to buy it fully, flat out. When I need to replace my phone, I just like to pay for it. And what I like about that, I personally, is that when I'm done with you, or you start getting on my nerves, and it may not be any problems with your service, it may just be customer interactions or something like that, especially because, like I said, T-Mobile especially has a bunch of MVNOs out there. So if I'm sick of my MVNO for T-Mobile, I'll be like, all right, fine. Cancel, take my same exact phone, take it over to another provider, or transfer my number, start the other one so there's a slight overlap, make sure I don't lose my number, and then get rid of that other account. And I like having that power to leave because I just got sick of being in contracts and, them trying to entice you to stay longer by offering you to flip your phone and all this other stuff. So I just consider it worth it to me and the way I live to just get a phone that's a couple generations old, manufacturer refurbished, unlocked, and take it to any provider I want. Now, there are some limitations in that. Certain phones have to be compatible. There is, I think it's GSM and, Dawn, put up the 2 kind editing, Dawn. Take care of this one. But you can't take like a GSMA phone over to a network that doesn't support that type of phone, but you can get that information really, really quickly. If you're buying a brand new phone and don't already own it, and you're trying to make sure it's compatible for what network you want to put the phone on, especially if it's an MVNO, you may check, get the phone, and then find out it's not compatible. But for the most part, it's worked out for me to get refurb phones, get them independent of the cell phone provider, and then just get a SIM with whatever provider I want to use. If you think I'd never want to own phones, 2 phones, not phones, I hope, you kind of need a cell phone these days. You need a smartphone. It's hard to survive without a smartphone. But if you're ever like, I don't want to own 2 phones, that seems kind of annoying. Like, I want the redundancy, but 2 phones just seems stupid. That's a valid thought. Or like, what you trying to hide, and are you a gangster? That'd be cool. Somebody thought I was a gangster. I could never be a gangster. I'm too much of a punk. But if you're like, I don't want to own 2 cell phones, keep in mind that you can do like a cell phone on one network and sometimes a connected tablet on another network. At one point, I did have a connected tablet for AT&T. I decided I didn't like the device, and I was really, really angry about it, because in that case, I went directly to AT&T, and I got device directly from AT&T, and I save up enough money to pay off the device and get out the contract. So you could do that. And that was just a bad device. Because I am thinking about getting a tablet again, by the way. Some of these tablets, because they're connected, they could still act as an emergency phone on an alternate network. It just would be a tablet, so you'd be like holding a giant tablet to your head. But you also have that choice. So you can have, like, on 3 separate networks, a cell phone on the network you trust most, maybe a tablet on the network you trust second, which could also allow you to have a bigger screen for things like streaming, and then have one of these little hotspot, or sometimes they're called jetpacks or whatever. They're essentially hotspots, MiFis. These are all different words for what's basically an independent hotspot device. And so you can have that. You can have one of those. You can have a tablet. You can have a cell phone. They're all 3 on different networks. You can hotspot from the cell phone. You can hotspot from the tablet. So if you need to use like a laptop computer, you can use those to supplement the computer experience. So you can split it up that way and still cover all 3 of your networks. So that's another one of those redundancy things, but also doesn't make you feel like you have, like me, 2 devices and 2 cell phone numbers and all of that. And sometimes I'll have one phone with me and come back and the other phone has like 4 or 5 text messages, and I'm like, sorry guys, that phone wasn't in my pocket. Because of my pursuit of redundancy and the best sort of system that was going to work for me, I have built for me kind of the perfect office inside this box truck. I don't feel like working anywhere else is as comfortable as working in here. Like, this space is so built around me and I freaking love it. So it may be silly to have 2 cell phones, a hotspot, and my satellite device, but it has kept me from playing Chase the Wi-Fi, being connected to Wi-Fi and then dropped. Something tends to work in most situations where I'm sitting down trying to get signal and I expect to at least have access to one, if not multiple signals. Also, like I said, instead of trying to have one device that's going to answer all my internet problems, I have 3 devices possible that I own that I can connect my laptop to try to do any work that requires an internet connection from the laptop. Because cell phones are so sophisticated now, there's so much I can do just on the cell phone. Now, I find for writing emails that require a sophisticated reply, I need to do that on the laptop. But I do that maybe for like 1 out of 15 emails or something like that. So many people communicate by text. Now, it's much more common. There used to be a bigger divide between email and text, and it's getting all kaflooey now. So while I'm grateful to be able to connect to my laptop, I'm also finding I don't need to always do it. If I'm watching a movie or a TV show, I'm just going to do it on my cell phone. I'm not going to waste a hotspot on that just to put it on a bigger screen unless I'm with company. So I just find redundancy to be the thing that has kept my internet signal consistent. In a way, just trying to depend on one device or try to find the best device, the best cell tower, hasn't worked out as well. So multiple devices is just what's working for me. Thank you for checking out another video and for hanging out until end. Just so you know, I am in service to this thing called the algorithm on YouTube, and sticking around to the end of videos does matter. And the other things that matter to Mr. Algorithm is hitting that subscribe button, hitting that thumbs up button, leaving comments in the comments. All of that matters, and I thank all you guys for every time you do that for me. Also, I'd like to extend special thanks to my supporters on Patreon and YouTube memberships. You guys really do keep me going.